After a tough night against Boston, how are you feeling? 43% on Twitter said little concerned, 34% said fine, 15 very concerned, 8% said they're in a panic right now. Sean Deveney, the NBA writer at The Sporting News. If you're a Sixer fan right now, Sean, how are you feeling?
I like the partly cloudy choice there. I think that sounds about right. I mean, certainly, look, they didn't have Jaylen Brown, so for them to still play the way they did offensively that's got to concern you. At the same time, I've seen the Celtics team a lot. I've seen them since they played without Kyrie Irving a lot. They're not a 117-point a night kind of team. That's not going to happen. They're not going to shoot 48% from the 3-point line again. That's a little out of their style, out of their depth. So if I'm a Sixers fan, I think you can kind of sit back and say, we just got their best punch. They probably can't play that well again.
Yeah, Sean, what were some of the things that you noticed that Boston did that maybe distracted Philly a little bit? And how much, I said yesterday, I'm not using it as an excuse if you're a Sixer fan to say, look, the rust, they didn't, but typically through the course of an NBA season, no team gets 6 days off. I mean, athletes, we know that. They like rhythm. They like their repertoire. They like to do things in the same fashion. Being off for 6 days is typically not conducive to, being in a rhythm.
Yeah, and for a team that's never been in the playoffs, for a team that this is all new to, if you're the Warriors or the Cavaliers and you've been doing this for 4 or 5 years and you've had that situation before, then you know how to handle it. But this is all, of course, new for this team. So I do think that probably played a bit of a role. I thought defensively what the Celtics did, if I'm concerned about anything as a Sixers fan, it was the way the Celtics were able to defend on Monday night. I thought they did a great job guarding the 3-point line. Obviously some of those are just looks that just miss that the Sixers will make, but obviously you go 5 for 26. The defense is doing something right. And I thought the way they handled both Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid was interesting. A lot of us thought, I for one thought we're going to see a lot of Al Horford on Joel Embiid, but we really didn't. It was mostly Aaron Baines. Horford probably, I think he wound up spending more time guarding Ben Simmons than guarding Embiid. So, and look, Embiid had a good game against Baines, and he'll continue to have good games against Baines. But I think what the Celtics have done is say, we'll live with that, but we're going to try to, throw a bunch of different options at Simmons, make things difficult on him. I think he saw probably 4 defenders, at different times. Morris was on him a lot. Horford was on him a lot. So, if they keep doing that, that's probably the bigger concern for me as a Sixers fan is just how well they played defensively, and we'll see what answers Brett Brown has.
Yeah, because we saw during the course of the year, the few teams that had a big that could run around with Simmons sometimes gave him problems. And as you wrote about it, Sporting News, Horford was able to focus up on Ben Simmons a little bit more, and sometimes having a guy that's equal in height to him gave him some issues.
Yeah, and I thought Morris did a pretty good job on him as well. That's something that, like I said, that would concern me. Obviously, the 7 turnovers, and he never seemed to get comfortable in that game, and that's probably the biggest thing if I'm a Sixers fan that I'd like to see change here in Game 2.
Yeah, and you mentioned and wrote about Aaron Baines and the fact that that's a big body. Now, it seemed that the Cavs, the Celtics were content on giving Embiid his. Like, we'll give you 2s because we're making 3s. As long as they're making 3s, it seems like they're okay allowing Embiid to make his 2s. And that strategy of having Baines kind of leaning on him wore Embiid out a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it wore him out, and I think what it does for the Celtics is it slows them down. I mean, if you're throwing the ball into the post and you're having Embiid possessions, then those aren't the ones where they're getting up and down. Those aren't the ones where they're having effective cuts to the basket, and those are the things that really make the Sixers so dangerous and allow them to score points in bunches, as we saw against Miami. So I think they're fine with letting them throw the ball into Embiid, putting Baines on him, and hoping that in the process they chew up 12, 14 seconds of clock. in those possessions, and they'll live with the results. I think that in terms of pace, that's the kind of pace that the Celtics want to play. It's not the kind of pace that the Sixers want to play. So I think that that's something they'll keep doing.
Now, are we reading too much into this game, or is it as simple as Boston shot 48% from three and Philadelphia shot 19%? Or were there other underlining things? I mean, because it's a make-or-miss league. If Boston makes 48%, they're going to beat Golden State with hitting that many three-pointers. So is it as that simple, or do you think that is deeper than just that number?
Well, Mike, we have to look deeply into it, or else we wouldn't have jobs, right? So don't make it too simple here. But yeah, I mean, look, they outscored them by 26 points on the 3-point line. Like I said, that's not the Celtics. They are not that good of a shooting team. They had a bunch of guys who were on all at the same time. I think the Sixers do have to play better defensively. I wonder, one guy I think you can kind of single out as having been a problem was Bellinelli. I think that they went at him. They found him in pick and rolls and got matchup problems on him every time that they could. I wonder if Brett maybe makes an adjustment and maybe pulls Bellinelli altogether from the rotation, or certainly plays him a little less. But yeah, I think
and Redick too, Sean. When Bellinelli and Redick were on the floor, that seemed to be a big problem.
Yeah, because you can find, if you can get Terry Rozier matched up against Bellinelli, they're going to take that and take advantage of it, or Horford on Redick when they make those switches. Then that's something that they're definitely going to try to take advantage of. So I do wonder if that's one of the adjustments we'll see from Brett.
Sean Deveney from the Sporting News is with us. The Sixers are 0-4. Against the Celtics when Boston scores at least 100 points. The question is, a team that can't score, how do they keep scoring 100 points against a team that's pretty good defensively?
Well, obviously, when Kyrie was in there, it was a little different. They were able to put up some more points. But this version of the Celtics, we saw this against Milwaukee, where Game 1 of that series, the Celtics came out and they were on fire, and they scored, wound up going overtime, but they scored, I believe it was over 120 points. And then the rest of the series, that kind of gradually came down till they were winning, 92 to 84, those kinds of games. That's where the Celtics live. That's where they're headed here, and they're not going to be able to keep putting up 100-point nights against this Philadelphia team. That's just not how they play.
And then 5 games versus Boston, the Sixers are only averaging 96. When they were playing in their winning streak there, they're averaging, about 115 a night. So styles make the fights, and it looks like Boston's personnel is giving the Sixers some sort of issues. And we talked about it before the series. This team is a more talented, more athletic version of what the Heat do, and the Heat gave the Sixers some problems.
Yeah, I think that's right, and they're both very well coached. I think they have that in common, and they're both very physical. I think the Heat can sometimes just be more dirty than physical, but the Celtics they use their physicality well. When you get a guy like Morris, a guy like Marcus Smart, they're going to get under your skin. There definitely going to be some, I wouldn't say fisticuffs, but, a little bit of pushing and shoving. We're going to see a lot of that as this thing goes on. But that's something that the Celtics do really well is play physical. And they're going to make it to, you're going to know that you played a tough basketball game by the end of it. They do that. They've done that consistently all year. And that's been really important for their defense, which, mentioned the threes that they made, but the Celtics, like I say, they're not an offensive team. They are a defensive team first, and that's not going to change.
So what, in your mind, is Brett Brown's, watching? The extra day is killing us here. I mean, they should be playing tonight. I mean, I know that the Bruins are playing there. Probably pushed this game back a night, but to have to sit around, the Sixers missed 6 games. Now they play 1. Now they got to sit off an extra day. They're probably chomping at the bit. So what is Brett Brown's reaction to Monday? What does he got to change? What's that that adjustment that you want to see the Sixers make?
Well, I mentioned certainly some of the things defensively. They're going to have to pay better attention to that and handle the mismatches that the Celtics create. I think that's one thing. I think obviously you keep shooting the threes. I mean, you got to keep shooting them. They're an important part of what Philly does, and I don't think you go away from that or anything. You just got to hope that more of them go down and more of them will go down. So I don't think you need to make a big adjustment as far as that goes. I do think though that you need to have a real tough film session with Ben Simmons and show him. There are times where he really just forced things, where he's really just going into just going into bad matchups and putting himself in bad situations. I think he's got to get away from that. The Celtics are really good at doing that sort of what they call a picket fence defense, where the guy who's guarding Ben Simmons has like 2 or 3 guys behind him. So if he gets past him, then he kind of gets passed off to another defender. He struggles with that. I think they need to, tell him, look, there are times where it's better for you to just get rid of the ball and play off the ball and wait for it to come back to you. I think he's probably the real key for me, and how he makes some adjustments from game 1 to game 2.
Yeah, and then it looked like what they were doing to Embiid down on the offensive side of the ball, like they kept screening at him and picking him, and they're trying to wear Embiid down on that defensive end of the floor so that when he comes down the other end, he doesn't have as much gas in the tank.
Yeah, I think that's not going to stop. I mean, that's, like I said, they're a physical team. They're going to keep doing that, they're going to force him to come out. I mean, you saw Aaron Baines sink 2 3-pointers. He made 3 all season. So that's something that it's a card they're going to have to play, because you've got to find ways to handle Embiid on both ends of the floor and trying to pull him out of that paint and create some lanes for a guy like Rozier. Then that's just something that I think you'll see Boston continue to do.
No Jaylen Brown, it looks like, again for game 2.
Yeah.
Marcus Smart's going to have a splint on his hand. I mean, realistically, can the Celtics do they have the horses to extend this thing and make it a long series without these guys? It's nice to win the one game and get on top and have everybody saying, look what they did. But in reality, without Brown, and if Smart's kind of still playing with a splint, although he's not much of an offensive guy anyway, he's more for the defensive side of things. But with no Brown potentially again, will the depth of the Celtics be challenged?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's a big injury for them. I think that they're hoping to get him back for Saturday. That'll be a whole week. Hamstrings can be tricky. It can feel fine one minute and then feel like you just got shot the next minute. So that's something that I don't think we'll really know exactly when he plays and when he plays, if he's going to be 100%. So it's going to be tough. I mean, they've gone with Semi Ojeleye quite a bit, and he's done okay, but he's a terrible offensive player. He is just really, really tough offensively. He just doesn't do a whole lot. Very good defensive player though. So it's something where, like I say, they can't. I just don't think with this lineup that they can that they've got enough offense. So I think certainly they played as well as they possibly could have in game 1. I just don't think that that they can maintain that. And don't forget, the Celtics haven't won a road playoff game yet. They lost all 3 games in Milwaukee, and their role players, guys like Tatum and Rozier, they have not played well on the road. So I think that's something to keep in mind if you're a Philly fan here as well.
That's interesting, because Tatum surely didn't, nor Rozier look like a role player the other night, man. Those guys were on top of the world. What about Fultz? Do you think that watching that game, he is such a crazy story? Do you think that Brown, who, he didn't rule him out, he said to say he's dead and buried, that's not true. It's a decision I got to make. But when you watch the style of game, do you think that he might have to go back to Fultz?
Yeah, I think if you trust him, then you can. But I'm not so sure that Brett trusts him. And I think it's a risky decision. But yeah, I think that what you could get out of him when he's been at his best, the few times that we've seen that over the course of the year, I do think, as a secondary ball handler, that is absolutely something that they need to take some pressure off of Ben. If he can knock down some shots, obviously that'd be great too. So, I think that ideally he'd be able to contribute, but we just haven't seen it, and I'm not sure that Brett really trusts him, to be honest with you.
Now, should we believe in Rozier for the long haul? He played well in Game 7 against the Bucks, and then he comes back with 29. So, I mean, at this stage, are we believing and trusting that he's one of the big three in Boston now for at least this series?
Yeah, I mean, he has definitely been a guy who has shown this capability. He's got some guts. I mean, there's no question about that. He is not afraid of the stage. Not afraid. His first start of his career came back in January, and he had a triple-double. I mean, he's a guy who's just been chomping at the bit to play. And of course they had Isaiah Thomas, and then they go from that to Kyrie Irving. So he hasn't really gotten an opportunity. But now that he is really showing what he can do, and I don't anticipate him stopping. Now he's capable of going. We saw this. He had some real duds against Milwaukee. He's certainly capable of a 3 for 14 kind of night, and that's probably something that'll come. But he's going to keep shooting, and he has proven to be really a great find for Danny Ainge.
Sean Deveney from the Sporting News is with us, and one of the things, Bill, you mentioned that obviously the series doesn't start until the road team finally wins a game. If the Sixers can get that win in Game 2, do you think this is a must-have Game 2, as we always talk about, or do you think the Sixers can defend the home court and then win one a little bit later? Or is it if they don't get one in Game 2, you're going to start to worry about a young team figuring out a way to win one later on?
There's no doubt that this is – Go ahead, Sean.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah. I mean, I think I was about to say the same thing as you, and that is that this group is if you do get down 2-0, obviously that's not an ideal situation, but the Celtics have not won a road game, and they have not played well away from the Garden. So I would certainly not panic even if they go down 0-2 from Philadelphia.
That's exactly what I was going to say. They're a young team. They haven't won on the road, so. This is it's a very important game, but this could string it out, and then one team's going to have to win on the road. So, if the Sixers would have to win on the road, if the Sixers want to win
the series, they're going to have to win a road game. Exactly. The Celtics don't necessarily have to win a road game.
True, they could just cover. They could just win. What they say, another team can't come in and win. So if they protect their home court, they could go at 7. But that's a young team, as you said. So I'm still, like I said, I'm fair to partly cloudy. Not completely worried, but I still like their chances.
Well, and the one thing, too, is, the fact that Boston, for the most part, they shot out of their minds the other night. To suggest, and you've seen a lot of this Boston team, I mean, that they just don't come out and shoot like that. To think, and look, the Sixers, this reminds me, Sean, a lot of Game 2 against the Heat, where they just didn't have it that night. They couldn't make a shot, and they lost on their home floor. That game on Monday night felt a lot like that Heat game. But the one thing is, having this extra day off, I think that certainly advantaged Boston.
Yeah, I would think so as well. I think that given their lack of depth, and if you're the Sixers, you want to get them out there and force them to wear down, force them to be fatigued. So yeah, the schedule has helped Boston in this case. Because they had Monday was a tough one. They had to play 48 hours earlier, Game 7, and then they had to come back and turn around and play Game 1. So yeah, this definitely does help them. It does help Jaylen Brown, possibly come back for Game 3. The more you can space this out, the better it is for him. So, I think that any time if you're the Celtics and you just have so few players that you can count on at this point, the more time you get, the better.
Last night, another reason why we don't buy into Toronto, or was it just Toronto always loses Game 1?
Well, they didn't against Washington. It looked like they had broken that curse, but no, geez, what a heartbreaker! And I'm not completely selling off Toronto here just yet. I think that how they bounce back will say a lot. They're going to have to go win one in Cleveland. If they can do that, if they can get this thing to 2-2, then I think we're looking at sort of the new Raptors, or a Raptors team that's a little tougher than what we've seen in the past. But but yeah, that was a very, very difficult loss. They're going to have to bounce back and, like I say, play like they have to not play like the old Raptors. Should not play like the team that we've seen in the playoffs before that's had so many failures.
I'll tell you, walking off the court last night, they look like a team that realizes we're still not good enough. Did you get that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. They had so many. I mean, those tap-ins that they had at the end of the game. That's a heartbreaker, and I'm sure just going off the floor. Especially you think LeBron didn't play that well. They got the game out of LeBron. I think they wanted, but to still lose. I do think that you're going to spend the next day or two kind of thinking, what kind of opportunity did we just give away? Like I said, I'm really curious to see how they bounce back, whether they have the intestinal fortitude to bounce back and to make this a series that they have a chance of winning.
Were you surprised at all that Steph Curry came in like he never missed a beat?
Yeah, he's gotten used to it.
Unbelievable.
He's right. I mean, if you look, they had a stat up on TV this morning about the 4 times that he's come back from injuries this year, and it's he averages something like 30-something points and shoots over 50%. It is pretty unbelievable that this guy's just as automatic as he is.
Tonight, Utah, Houston, and of course the Rockets lead that series 1-0. Did Utah make you feel like they can make this a series, or the Rockets just too much?
I think the Rockets are just too much. I just don't see a whole lot in terms of matchups that Utah can go to. I just don't say. I just think they're outmanned in this series. Certainly playing in Utah is tough. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Utah get one of those games, but I don't think they'll get more than that. I think this winds up being a 5-game series.
Sean Deveney at Sean Deveney on Twitter for the Sporting News, the NBA playoffs. Will you be in Boston tomorrow night?
I will for sure. Hopefully go out to shoot around as well. But this is game one was certainly something. It was just an electric building there.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how they come back for game two.
I got to tell you, the 5 o'clock Saturday and 6 o'clock Monday.
Yeah.
Not great home court advantages with those 2 times.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, geez, I don't know. I've never seen that before. I mean, I've been covering the league for 19 years. I don't remember seeing such weird, timing in terms of the way they've got these games. I know, like you say, the Bruins are part of the problem. They own the building here in Boston, and so they always get preference in terms of when their games are, and I know that's part of it. But still, man, to have a 6 o'clock game on a Monday, that's a weird thing. I've never seen that before.
I was at the 8 o'clock game the other night, and it was a late arriving crowd because just the traffic in that area is so bad. Yeah. I can't imagine what Philly's going to look like at trying to get there by 6 o'clock. You got a half-empty building at tip-off there. By the way, you expect war pigs to be blaring through the sound system at the TD Garden.
That's a new one as well. They used to do. I can feel it coming in the air tonight. The Phil Collins song when they had the Kevin Garnett teams, but they went with War Pigs, and I think, hey, if you've got Ozzy Osbourne or Phil Collins, I'll take Ozzy Osbourne every time. It's a much cooler way to enter, if you ask me.
All right, Sean Deveney, longtime NBA writer here on the Sports Bash. It is the Sixers and Celtics tomorrow night right here, 8:30 on 97.3 ESPN. Thank you, Sean.
All right, Mike. Thanks.